When the WA sent me a letter threatening to fine me for having too many guests, they thought they could intimidate me. They didn't know the truth. I own the only hotel in town. And when they tried to shame me, they exposed something far worse than my so-called violations, their own prejudice and hypocrisy. What happened next turned our entire community upside down, and taught the WA a lesson they'll never forget. The letter came in a crisp white envelope, stamped with the HOA's official seal like it was some royal decree. I remember the weight of it in my hand, heavier than it should have been, like a symbol of everything I'd tried to escape when I moved into this neighborhood: control, judgment, and that unspoken tension that always seems to follow people like me. I had worked my entire life to get here, to walk through the front door of a house I owned, not rented. To breathe in the smell of fresh paint and know those walls belonged to me. It wasn't just a house, it was proof that every sleepless night and every sacrifice had meant something. But even in this so-called perfect community, I knew what I was up against. I tore open the envelope, expecting maybe a notice about lawn maintenance or trash pickup. But no, what I read sent a rush of heat to my face. You are hereby notified that you are in violation of WA rules regarding occupancy and guest limits. Multiple reports have indicated an excessive number of visitors at your residence. Continued violation will result in fines of $500 per occurrence, effective immediately. I read it again, slower this time, as if the words would rearrange themselves and make sense. Occupancy violation, excessive visitors. I laughed out loud, but it wasn't from humor. It was that bitter laugh that comes when you know you're about to fight a battle you didn't start. Because those guests, they were so concerned about. They were my family, my cousins who drove hours just to spend a weekend together. My aunties who brought homemade sweet potato pie and stories from back home. And yes, sometimes we got loud, sometimes we laughed too much, but that's what family does when they've spent years being told they don't belong anywhere. But in this neighborhood, a group of black folks gathering on a porch meant something else. It meant suspicion. It meant whispers behind manicured hedges. It meant another letter in the mailbox, signed with authority but dripping with something far uglier than rules. I sat down at my kitchen table, letter in one hand, phone in the other. My first instinct was to call someone, anyone, to vent. But then I thought about my father, and the words he used to tell me when life tried to shrink me: don't let them define your worth, son. Show them who you are without lowering yourself. So I took a deep breath and started making calls, but not to the HOA. I called my family, I called my people, because if they thought a piece of paper was going to shame me into silence, they had no idea who they were dealing with. By Saturday, my house was alive again. Cars lined the street, music hummed from the backyard, and laughter spilled into the night air like a hymn. Not to defy anyone, but to remind myself why I worked so hard to be here. That's when the WA president showed up. She strutted down the sidewalk like she owned the ground under her feet, Karen in every sense of the word, pearls glinting in the streetlight, her clipboard clutched like a weapon. Two other board members trailed behind her, faces stiff with that mix of discomfort and superiority. "Mr. Daniels," she said, not even trying to hide the disdain in her voice. "We need to talk about your gatherings." I looked at her, calm as ever, because I knew what this was really about. It wasn't about noise. It wasn't about parking. It was about presence. My family's presence, our laughter, our joy, too loud for their quiet little world. "I read your letter," I said, handing her the crumpled paper like it was a bad joke. "So let me explain something. These aren't just guests. This is family, and unless your rules say we can't have family visit, you're out of line." She gave a tight smile, the kind people wear when they think they've got power over you. "The rules are clear," she said. "No more than 4 guests at a time. This," she gestured at the cars, "the people on my porch, is excessive. If you don't comply, you'll be fined." Her voice was sweet as poison, and for a second, I almost let the anger spill out. But then, something inside me shifted. I remembered something they didn't know. Something that turned this entire conversation into a game they couldn't win. I leaned in just enough for her to see the calm in my eyes. "You really want to talk about guests?" I said, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "Because I happen to own the only hotel within 10 miles of here. So if you're worried about visitors, you might want to think about who's been housing half this neighborhood's out-of-town friends." Her face froze, just for a second. A flicker of something, shock, maybe fear, before she snapped back into her practiced smile. But I saw it. I saw the way her fingers tightened on that clipboard like it was a lifeline. "Oh," I continued, letting the silence stretch, "and since you're so concerned about rules, maybe you should check your own. Because targeting one homeowner for something others do every weekend, that sounds a lot like discrimination. And I've got no problem making that public." That was the moment everything changed. She didn't say a word, just turned on her heel and walked away, her board members trailing behind like shadows. But I knew this wasn't over. Because when people like that feel their control slipping, they don't back down quietly. They double down, and I was ready for them. The wad didn't take long to strike back. 3 days later, I woke up to find another letter in my mailbox, thicker this time, like they wanted the weight of their words to crush me. The language was harsher, too. Failure to comply will result in escalating fines, legal action, and possible foreclosure. Foreclosure. That word hit like a punch. It wasn't just a threat, it was a message. You don't belong here, and we'll do whatever it takes to push you out. I sat there at the kitchen table, the morning sun cutting sharp lines across the paper, and felt that old, familiar heat rising in my chest. But anger wasn't going to win this. Strategy would. That night, I called a meeting, but not with them. With my people, my family, my friends, even some neighbors who'd quietly told me they didn't like how the HOA was handling things. We filled my living room, voices low but spirits high, because we knew this fight wasn't just about me. It was about every person who'd ever been told they were too much for a space they'd earned a right to be in. And then, I told them my plan. The next week, I invited the WA to a discussion at my house. I even made it sound polite, professional. I wanted them comfortable, before I turned their entire argument upside down. They showed up right on time, the president with her clipboard, the treasurer with his smug little grin, and the secretary who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. They sat at my table like they owned the place. And for a few minutes, I let them talk. Let them rattle off their rules, their warnings, their empty threats dressed up in legal jargon. Then, I slid a folder across the table. "What's this?" the president asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. "Documentation," I said calmly. "Proof that your rule enforcement has been selective. See, I've got photos of other homes with more than 4 guests, no letters sent, no fines threatened. And here," I tapped another paper, "is a copy of the Fair Housing Act. You know, the federal law that makes what you're doing illegal." The room went quiet. The treasurer cleared his throat, but before he could speak, I dropped the real bomb. "You also might want to know," I said, leaning back in my chair, "that I own the Daniels Hotel, the only hotel within 10 miles. Which means every wedding guest, every family reunion, every out-of-town visitor your little WA welcomes. They stay in my rooms. They eat in my restaurant. So if you want to talk about excessive guests, maybe you should look at how much you depend on me to keep this community thriving." Their faces were priceless, shock melting into something darker. Anger, maybe fear. The president opened her mouth, but no sound came out. So I kept going. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice low but steady. "You're going to rescind these bogus fines. You're going to stop harassing me and my family. And you're going to do it quietly, because if you don't, I will take this public. And when people hear that your WA tried to intimidate a black homeowner for having family over while ignoring everyone else, you won't just lose this fight. You'll lose your positions, your reputation, maybe even your WA charter." Silence. Heavy, tense, the kind that makes the air feel thick. Then, slowly, the president nodded. Not because she agreed, but because she knew she had no choice. They left without another word. But I wasn't done, because this wasn't just about winning. It was about making sure no one else had to fight this battle again. So I made a call to a lawyer who specialized in housing discrimination. I filed a formal complaint with the state, and then, I did something that made the WA choke on their pride. I hosted the biggest community event this neighborhood had ever seen. We called it Unity Weekend. Open invite, food trucks, music, games for the kids. People came from all over, black, white, Latino, Asian, because here's the truth, most folks don't care about WA drama. They care about connection, and when you give them a reason to come together, they show up. Even some board members came, though they stuck to the edges like ghosts. They watched as neighbors laughed, danced, shared plates of barbecue, and realized what I'd known all along: community isn't about rules. It's about respect. That night, As the sun dipped low and kids ran barefoot across the grass, I stood on my porch and felt something shift, not just in the neighborhood, but in me. Because this fight started with a letter meant to shame me, but it ended with a reminder: dignity isn't something anyone can give you. You claim it, you protect it, and when you do, you don't just win for yourself, you win for everyone who comes after you. In the WA, they never sent me another letter. Not because they liked me. Not because they